Hi guys, Tela Mathias here again, one of the managing partners at PhoenixTeam. And this is the second segment in our Accessible AI series where we are talking about how AI and generative AI is going to fundamentally change the way software development works and how it is going to expedite concept to cash, time to value, whatever you want, whatever phrase you want to use to describe it. Today, we're going to talk about what we call the imagine space. So this is the space of software development where we try to figure out what problems we should solve and how we can add value as quickly as possible. I am with my very good friend, Brian Woodring, who is going to set this segment up for us.
Hey, Tela. Yeah, so when we ended our last segment, Tela kind of teased the idea of how do we use AI potentially to change the beginning of a software delivery or software development lifecycle, the part where you're imagining, you're discovering, you're specifying. And the thing I've always found interesting, and the reason this one's really passionate for me, something I'm very passionate about, is that so much of the technology built around software delivery is built around writing code and shipping that code to production. There are billions of dollars in development tools, programming languages, code repositories, CI/CD, DevOps, but shockingly little investment being made in the part of software where you actually figure out what the value is and whether you should even build it to begin with. There's a lot of process, there's a lot of agile and discovery life cycles and a bunch of other stuff that probably is kind of correct but isn't actually helping very much, and not actually a lot of energy making any of that easier to do. And so I find that fascinating, and I've already seen some examples where generative AI has been phenomenally effective at making that much faster, because I do think that's such a critical part of the life cycle to even getting to the point where you know whether you should build something or not. I know, Teal, you've spent a lot of your life and a lot of your career trying to solve that exact problem.
Yeah, definitely. And figuring out which problems to solve and then actually being able to test the fact that you solved them and you really provided value to a market or a set of users. I mean, that's the key. And I think one of the things that we've seen post Agile in the post Agile era, right? Post Agile manifesto is, well, if we just fix the process, everything's going to be great. And I think what I've seen is that the promise of Agile really hasn't come true. A like-minded team of individuals who are aligned around a common goal, whether they use Agile Scrum, Safe, Waterfall, Wagile, really doesn't matter. That's what it takes to get things done. And the key is getting to that right problem. And it just takes too long to get feedback in most of the models today. It's too hard to get access to those end users and buyers of technology who really have the problems to solve. And so, if we could take the time it takes to figure out if you've got good ideas down to minutes, then it would make shopping in the idea store a lot easier. It's very easy to shop in the Neiman Marcus of the idea store, right? The $150 million idea store. That's not generally the section of the store that I tend to shop in. And I know that you've had some experience shopping in the very large idea store. I shop more in the Dollar General idea store. And I'm looking to get that great deal. And I think that the ability to rapidly understand a space, the ability to, in the imagine space of software development, the ability to have a skilled interview, take a really good, have a really good conversation with a customer where you tease out all those things that simply don't exist in the corpus of these large language models, right? The things that's up here, the things that comes after 25 years of experience. You feed that into a generative AI solution, and all of a sudden you can pick out in very rapid speed, what are the opportunities? What are the things I already knew? All right, great. So now I've come up with this idea. Let's do a storyboard about that, let's explore some, the conceptual frameworks that we should use. And I think that AI is really going to help us there. Any
Yeah.
reaction?
Yeah. Here's here's my take on this, right? You talk about the store. I think that's a really apt metaphor, right? Because there are companies everywhere on the spectrum or organizations. There are startups and small businesses where literally every single dollar counts, right? That may be one more week your company survives. There are big companies with lots of profit and that can afford to swing and miss occasionally, even on big ideas. But this is something that I learned the hard way, is no matter how much money the company that you're working for, owning, or whatever has, no one can really afford to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and keep missing. And even when you can't afford the money, you probably can't afford the time. Because the reality is, most ideas suck and they don't work. And it's not a technical limitation typically. Those are actually, I think, usually like the least risky parts of a major software project. I know that sounds really weird coming from a career engineer, but my experience has been that that's usually not where products fail. They usually don't fail because you couldn't build them. They usually fail because you build them and it doesn't work. Not technically, the
Yeah.
business idea doesn't work. You build a product and no one uses it. Or you build a product and lots of people use it, but it doesn't actually save them any time or deliver any value to them. In reality, I think that's generally the far more challenging problem. And usually, when you're discovering a new product or trying to imagine a new product, that's actually probably where you're going to fail, is it doesn't really work as a concept. And so, if you're going to have to try a bunch of ideas before you find the thing that actually works, then really, no matter how rich you are, you can't afford for that to take months and millions of dollars each time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And here at PhoenixTeam, we are imagining a way to really speed up the imagination process because it's existential to our business, right? This business, the business of making software, 18 months, 3 years from now is going to be fundamentally different. Yes, today we use user stories and acceptance criteria. I am highly suspicious that in 3 years from now, that's going to be the currency of software development. I think there's going to be whole new currencies that are created in this space, just like there will be whole new computer programming languages that are going to be created in this space. And we have a very captive audience of users. And one of the things that we've done on our journey, where we, I mentioned, I think on our last segment, that we created what I have come to discover is called a RAG bot. So for those of you following along at home, RAG, retrieval augmented generation. That is where you feed additional context to, in our case, a custom GPT, so that you can enrich the requests you're making into these large language models and contextualize them to get a better answer. And what we found when we pushed our custom GPT, our little RAG bot, and we started giving it to people to use, is we found all this other stuff that they wanted to do with it. Oh, can you put this in here? Oh, what about that? Hey, can you make it do this? And we were able to turn those things so fast. And even though we're trying to move on from our ragbot and into actually our own um, agnostic, true application with its own proprietary Phoenix user experience, we're still maintaining our little ragbot because people are still using it. And that's how fast you can do. We can push our changes overnight, new ideas overnight. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I bet you what you're going to find is that a lot of the output coming out of that are things that no one would have even had time to do before. Under
That's
the
right.
crunch of shipping something on a deadline, a lot of the best stuff goes by the wayside. You just don't have time. You got to get the minimum out. I got to get this backlog out, or the engineers are going to sit idle. What's the least I can do? And inevitably getting access to information. So being able to produce the kind of material, really great acceptance criteria, really great user stories or mock-ups or all of those things, that's such a luxury that normally I can tell you as a career engineer, you just don't really end up getting that very often. And it's incredibly
I,
valuable when you do.
couldn't agree more. And I think this concept of MVP, we've all seen this, plummet into the descent of minimum viable product, where the focus is on minimum and not viable. And I know, our good friend Marty Kagan, that concept of MVP is that version of the application or whatever it is you're building that has so much value and it exceeds the switching cost. right? We can overcome because we've added so much value that we just can't wait to actually use it. And we're willing to forego, all these other things that matter. But you know what? I got my eyes on the prize, and that piece of value is really going to move the needle for me. And I'm ready to go because, and I've seen this dozens and dozens of times in my career, only the customer, the client, that end user is going to make the decision to go live.
Mhm.
As a product company, you can do everything you want. You can beg, plead, you can PowerPoint, you can do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it takes the client, the customer, the user's decision to use your product. And if you don't have value, you don't have anything.
Hey, even if you convince procurement and you get a contract, they can't make people use it in most cases.
Can't
And if
make people.
actually delivering value in the world is what you're here for, and I think for us, it's what we're here for, really, you either win with your users or you fail. That's what it comes down to. But that's not easy to find. That's the thing is that it's deceptively tricky to find that thing. I've shipped software that I was sure was going to absolutely kill it, right? And it just didn't really take. People liked it, but they didn't love it, or they didn't like it better than something they already had. I've shipped things that I thought, hey, this is kind of janky, and let's just get something out there. And like the tool they all built, like it just caught fire, and immediately you just couldn't pry it out of people's hands. Uh, there's really no way to find that except to try a lot of different ideas, which is why making trying ideas much faster is probably the single most important thing you can do to actually succeed.
Totally agree. And it's been so refreshing for us to have this, really the perfect example of a self organizing, empowered team. Figuring our way, learning new tech, right? I wrote about this the other day, the AI roller coaster. Oh, I know everything. AI is amazing. And then you
I
find somebody
read
like
that. That was good.
Yan, or you find Chad Steelberg, or you find, pick an incredibly um, well studied, researched, hands on application, folks out there that just crush everything in AI. And then you're like, oh, AI is amazing, and I don't know anything at all. And that's the journey. But I tell you what I do know is I do know how to make software development, and I do know how to make software, and I do know how to solve problems using technology. And I intend to take this that our good friend John Comiskey calls, as big as the combustion engine, as big as the internet, as big as the personal computer. I don't need to build the next combustion engine. I just need to take this existing custom combustion engine that's been put out there and use it to cut time to value. And as I
That's
see
really
the
well
problem,
said. I think that's where the winners are going to be, the people who can figure out ways to take this amazing new technology and solve a problem that's existed for so long that maybe we even forgot it's there.
totally agree. And I think when I look at this problem, it takes too long. It's too expensive. And I just don't think that people can really take it anymore. There's not really been an alternative. Uh, you know, and now I think we're seeing that there's an alternative. And it's not exactly a walk in the park for our agile scrum teams that are out there, right? So as upset as our um, completely legitimately and justifiably angry customers are out there, then we've got our, frankly, some of despondent scrum teams, right? It's hard out there. And when we're not able to get feedback on our ideas fast, when we're not able to get stuff to production fast, like it really takes a toll. And, process. I'm convinced the process isn't the problem. What do you think the problem is?
I think a good process is better than a bad one, and it's maybe even better than none at all, although that's debatable. But I can tell you, process almost certainly isn't the solution, because if it was, then one of the 587 Agile books I've read would have had the answer somewhere in it. And amazingly, none of them did. And they all pretty much said the same thing. They value the right things, they tell you to do the right things, but they really don't usually tell you what to do when you can't actually afford to do the right thing because the deadline's coming up, because you've got to try 30 different ideas and you don't have time to make 30 different prototypes to put in front of a user, right? So it's great to tell you you need to do all those things, and they're certainly true. Like you can read Marty Kagan or the Agile Manifesto, and everything's true, but it feels like it's kind of missing the point that actually doing that right also prices most people out of actually making technology. So I think what's actually needed is how do you do all those things that Agile tells you should be doing to be obsessed with your customer and their value and working with them closely and putting ideas in front of them frequently and iterating often. How do you actually make that the cost of each of those cycles so much lower that you can actually afford to do all the things that you need to do?
I couldn't agree. And I'm sure the ones I've read are a good cross section of the ones that you've read. And before we wrap up, my hypothesis is that everybody pretty much makes software the same way. Some of us do more customer discovery. Some of us do get feedback earlier. Some of us prototype more. But at the end of the day, we have to understand the customer and their business. We have to understand the problem that we're trying to solve. We have to discover the solution to that. We need to write some requirements. We need to write some code. We need to test it, and we need to get feedback and lather, rinse, repeat. And whether it's again, whether it's agile, scaled agile, scrum at scale, large scale scrum, pick your poison. It's pretty much all the same. And I believe my hypothesis is that if we can take each of those steps that everybody does, we can make them go much faster. If we can cut the waste out of these processes, and we can elevate the work of product and engineering professionals, that necessarily the entire process will go faster. We can iterate faster. We can get to value faster. And I think, I agree with you on the process end of things. And I just don't think the process is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're talking to somebody who ran SAFe for about 2,000 technology professionals for, call it, 3 years. And right now, I could not tell you one single thing about SAFe that would differentiate it from any other agile methodology that's being sold out there other than it's expensive. And so I genuinely don't know. And honestly, most of that stuff leaves me cold because it tells you what you ought to do. It really doesn't actually help you do it. It doesn't make you suddenly more empathetic or more curious or have more time to be empathetic and curious, which nobody's got. So I think that those are the real problems that actually have to be solved. And it's so funny because you get to the back half where you're coding and deploying, billions of dollars in industry built around making that automated, probably because it's engineers making it. Very little on that figuring out what the heck we're going to build and then making sure everyone on the team has a shared understanding of what that is, which is also really important. It's one thing for like a product manager to know. It's another thing for the whole team to know. They need to all know. And so that I think is where some of the real opportunities are. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end our segment for today. Next time, why don't we talk about the challenges and the solutions in finding and keeping that shared understanding? Because if the process isn't the problem, it's got to be something. And I know that we both believe that getting to shared understanding and keeping it is really the problem. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise today. Again, I'm Tela Mathias, one of the managing partners at PhoenixTeam. Tune in next time where we're going to talk about finding and keeping shared understanding and how generative AI will help us.
Thanks for having me.